In 2008, the smartphone landscape was a very different beast to what it is today. Back then, Apple's revolutionary iPhone had already been out for a year, and while it was already beginning to make waves, already reaching almost 20% market share in the US, it was only slowly being trickled out into global markets, where Nokia's newly acquired Symbian OS still dominated, having over 50% market share, and that was quickly transitioning into a more touch-based interface. In the States, BlackBerry was still quickly growing and would continue to do so for a number of years, eating into what Windows Mobile's market share was, a platform that was popular but was looking increasingly dated. And then there was the venerable Palm OS, which had one final gasp with the Centro, which was actually a surprise hit. In a field of legacy operating systems that were crying for modern overhauls, there was space for a new player to come along that was built with capacitive touchscreens in mind. After all, HTC couldn't continue to skin Windows Mobile 6 forever. Adding to this demand, the iPhone was also exclusive to the AT&T network in the US, and all the other carriers wanted their own iPhone. And that's where this came in. The T-Mobile G1, otherwise known as the HTC Dream in Europe. And little did we know at the time, but this would quickly become one of the most influential phones of all time, and it would reshape how the industry would be for decades to come. Within the next 6 years after the release of this phone, Nokia, Microsoft, BlackBerry, and Palm would all come out with their next generation new operating systems. And in 2025, not a single one of them remain. And that is largely due to the impact of this little thing. So let's take a look at the G1 and see what made this the future of smartphones. Hi all, my name is Davis and welcome back to my channel where we cover all things tech. And yes, today we are going to be taking a look at the T-Mobile G1. And for the longest time, I have had very mixed feelings about this phone, because while I do see its significance, for me this represents the Grim Reaper. It's because of this, or the lineage of this phone rather, that my favorite brands like Palm and Nokia are now resigned to the annals of history. So because of that, I've never really given this phone a fair chance. So today I will try to put all of my prejudices aside when looking at this thing. If you enjoy watching me suffer and want to see more Android videos, be sure to like and subscribe, and also feel free to comment any questions and thoughts that you might have about this device. So first of all, I do remember the sentiment surrounding this phone back when it came out quite clearly. Back in 2008, I had fallen for the charms of the iPhone 3G. I remember how badly 12-year-old me wanted one of these after seeing videos of Doodle Jump and other games that use the accelerometer. However, despite that, I was still very loyal to Palm, so I stuck with using my Windows Mobile Trio Pro, and even back then I knew that it wasn't very good in comparison. So the Android project felt a little bit weird to me, because while it did look like a phone that was heavily influenced by the iPhone, it was also very clearly inspired by the legacy operating systems of the time. And it felt like a space that Google really didn't belong in, as during the time Google was still mainly known just for search, Gmail, and Maps. I felt like that at the time this would just be one of those products that Google launches to a very muted audience before giving up on it a few years later. But my God, I was wrong. So let's begin by taking a look at the box. And it looks like a box that was inspired by older phones like the Palm Trio 650, which I unboxed a few years ago. And it's very different in style to, let's say, the iPhone 3G box that was becoming quite fashionable. That I have over here. And I always find rather amusing. It's honestly hilarious to see the specifications and features that advertisers thought were worth advertising back in the day, especially with almost 18 years worth of hindsight. So on the top of the box over here, they're definitely highlighting that this is a Google phone. They're not shying away from that. So because of that Google connection, they are promoting the fact that it unlocks the power of the internet, which means that you can access Google search with one touch. Wow. There is also apparently a large touchscreen with a full keypad. I mean, 3.2 inches. It was still bigger than, let's say, an HTC Touch Diamond and some other phones, but clearly smaller than the 3.5 inch of the iPhone, so I'm not sure about the use of the word large there. Quite amusingly as well, they also mentioned that there is a vast choice of useful applications and exciting games. Well, seeing that this phone launched with a grand total of 50 apps and games, I feel like that's some creative liberties we're taking here. And on the back over here, we also highlight that there is a high performance browser with zoom. And while that is cool, I mean, come on, Opera Mini was pretty good on my Trio and that had zoom as well. We also have apparently 256 megabytes of storage, which was absolutely pitiful even back then. But at least you could expand it with a microSD card, and it comes with a 2 gigabyte one. We also have a 3 megapixel camera somewhere here with autofocus, which wasn't a feature that was too popular yet, so that's good to know. And what I found quite impressive with this unboxing experience is that when we remove this slip, we can see that's actually quite remarkably high quality underneath here. It's a very firm cardboard box. We've got the G1 logo here, T-Mobile. I don't know how the HTC Dream version looks like, probably quite similar still. And then we've got a magnetic clasp that when I open it up, close your eyes, yes, the phone is over there. So my first impression of it back in the day was, my God, it was ugly. I mean, I have no idea why the first few generations of HTC Android phones were so damn ugly. This, the Dream, the later Magic successor, and finally the Hero, they were also blobby and weird with odd chins that stuck out like that. I mean, they just don't look designed, especially when compared to what HTC could do on the Windows side, with the HTC Touch Diamond in particular, and also the Touch HD. I mean, those were some stunning looking phones. So why did they think that the Android phones needed to look hideous in comparison? I don't know. And the G1 was probably the most egregious of those because it is a very ungainly looking thing indeed. In fact, it almost looks like that it was, you know, designed in the 90s. There's very little charm to it at all. But let's get back to the box, because this came during an era where, you know, the micro USB cable that everyone hates, it didn't quite exist yet. So we've actually got a custom version of a mini USB cable. Now, I don't know why they chose this because you can still use a standard mini USB cable with the phone, but yeah, I don't love a proprietary port. What's also quite amusing is the fact that you don't have a 3.5mm headphone port. I mean, why they decided not to include one, I have no idea. So what you had to do to listen to your music was use this included dongle. So you plugged your headphones in, you've got your dongle now, and then you can plug it into your phone. I mean, how is that for courage, yeah? Take that, Apple. Bit you by 9 years apparently to delete the headphone jack. Beyond that, we've also got some CDs and documentation. But while we don't have them with us as well, this was also supposed to come with a 2 gigabyte micro SD card. There was a screen protector as well apparently, and also a pouch. So they definitely didn't skimp on the packaging here. This definitely comes from the generation of phones where the unboxing experience was actually an enjoyable experience, where there was surprise and delight often that arose from these optional accessories. Compare that to the latest phones, let's say, like the Sony Xperia, where you don't even get a cable. I think the industry has turned to a very sad and dark direction. Okay, so now that we've had a look at the box, which, you know, was very fun, let's take a look at the phone itself. And we have to remember that while it's a product very much of its time, the iPhone had already been out for a year, and the Palm Pre, which is represented by this latest Pre 3 here, which so I'm cheating a little bit, this was only less than a year away. So if we have a look at the G1, this is a vaguely blocky slash blobby shape with a 3.2 inch LCD capacitive touchscreen up here. It's 480 by 320 in resolution, which means that it's about the same resolution that was on the iPhone or Palm Pre. And I would say that's quite a decent screen at the time. Maybe it's because my eyes are going bad, but it actually looks acceptably sharp to me, and it does get bright enough to see in most situations. We also have to report about how nice just having a capacitive touchscreen is. We often forget today, but it was a massive revolution in phone design. My Trio Pro at the time had a resistive touchscreen, and let's just say that was really difficult hitting the close button in the corner, especially with the finger. It was difficult with the stylus as well, so having a capacitive touchscreen definitely is great. They did make some very odd choices though. For instance, I have no idea why they insisted on having this little chin down here. Does it really help in bringing the microphone, which I assume is this hole, closer to the mouth? I mean, it would probably be closer for like 2 centimeters. I don't think it does anything. It's not an issue while you are using it though, as it does feel relatively comfortable, but it is undeniably ugly. And on that chin, we've got not 1, got not 2, not 3, but 5 buttons down here, plus a clickable trackball. It's like that the design team couldn't decide what navigational paradigm they wanted to follow. So they were like, yeah, let's have them all. And this really is a sign of perhaps changes in priority during the phone's development. We know from early prototype Android phones that have since been leaked that the OS was originally supposed to ape BlackBerry with a trackball interface, but then it changed halfway through to reflect the iPhone's touch interface. So it feels like that they couldn't decide on which one they wanted, so they decided to have both. So not only do we have an answer and reject call button, the reject call button also doubles up as a power button. And you've also got a home button to take you home. We've got a back button over here that acts like a modern Android back button. And we also have, quite interestingly, a menu button that brings up certain app options. This menu button is a little bit like swiping down on the top left-hand corner on a Palm WebOS phone. And while it is a little bit confusing to begin with, you do quickly get used to it all. Most interesting to me though is the trackball. And I have to say, I'm actually surprised by how nice it is to use. I have to admit that I've never really dailyed a phone with a trackball before, or a trackpad. I went straight from the Palm Trio Pro to the Palm Pre, but I do sort of like it here. I actually do prefer it to the trackpad experience that I've had on the BlackBerry Classic that I used very briefly. It sort of just works, and it's really enjoyable to actually being able to control the entire phone with effectively not moving your thumb at all. Instead of having to reach the upper echelons of the display to bring down notifications, let's say, you know, you could just bring it down with the trackball. See, that's brilliant. You can literally do anything you want on the phone without moving your thumb too far, unless you needed to type at least. Because if you wanted to type when the phone came out, no, you could not use this virtual keyboard that came out in the Android 1.5 update, which is absolutely awful, by the way. Instead of doing that, what you needed to do was flip the phone onto its side and then slide out the physical keyboard. How or why they thought that this was an acceptable idea, I have no clue. It's not like that it's a keyboard that you would want to use with one hand either, because even if you use your left hand, you can't quite reach the other side. If you use your right hand, then you've got no chance at all. It's definitely a two-handed experience, but then it's so asymmetrical. It is just such a weird design choice. But as much as I like the number key, that's basically where the likes end. The travel is really, really limited, a bit like on the original Palm Pre. There's not much feedback either, like on the original Pre. And you know, typing, especially from the right-handed point of view, it feels like typing in a shoebox, again, like the original Palm Pre. And if you thought that was weird, things do get even weirder, because do you want to guess where the microSD card slot is? Nope, it's not like behind the battery or anything like that. Rather, it's hidden within this chin section. You pull this out, and then you've got the microSD card over here. It only accepts up to 8 gigabytes, which is still plentiful for the time, but yeah, it's a very odd but semi-cool choice. The sliding mechanism though is quite sturdy, which is very good. On the left-hand side, we do have the volume rocker. On the right side, we have the camera button, which you could press down, and it opens the camera, albeit very slowly. There's the camera. And on the bottom, we've got a mini USB port, and that's basically it. Like with the modern phone, there's no 3.5mm headphone jack here, so you do have to use the dongle to listen to music. And as I said before, the courage that HTC had back in the day was insane. On the back of the phone, it's quite clean. It's a soft touch plastic, and I'm very glad to say, somehow it hasn't turned all sticky yet, despite being almost 20 years old. The white version that I've played with in the past is a glossy plastic, which I prefer. And back here is the 3-megapixel camera with autofocus. We've got the speaker here as well. And so while I have been a little bit harsh on this phone so far, it does have some, some upsides. It's got some good points to it. It's actually really comfortable to hold in the hand, and there's just a bit of a utilitarian charm to the way that it just feels cobbled together by engineers with no designer in sight. It's a real engineer's phone, not a designer's one. And so let's talk about the operating system. So this version that I've got is running Android 1.6, otherwise known as Android Donut. And this was pretty great because back then, software updates were still not a common thing to have on a phone. For instance, on my Trio Pro, I really wanted Windows Mobile 6.5 on it, but I was stuck on 6.1. And this was also the first mobile OS, I think. Someone might need to fact check me, but I think this was the first mobile OS with over-the-air updates, which Palm would also get very excited about during the WebOS announcement, but I think Android had it here first. So 1.6 brought really exciting features, like, do you want to guess? The quick search box on the home screen, which acts a little bit like universal search on WebOS or Spotlight search on the later iOS 3. And basically it means that you could just search anything you want straight from the home screen. The second biggest feature was even more exciting than that, because when you open the camera app, there's a toggle between video and photos. I mean, wow. I think this is especially impressive because when this phone launched, there wasn't video taking capabilities either. And then when you do take a video, I think it's limited to 1 minute in length. Yes, so you're limited to just 1 minute of video. So it's like filming an early TikTok video. In 2025, I do have to admit that there's no surprise that this phone isn't the easiest thing to tinker around with, as a lot of the documentation is gone. You can't easily download any apps anymore because you can't log into the market anymore. And also you can't easily sideload any apps. So what we are going to do is just play around with the very out-of-the-box stock experience. Unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of time to look into how to tinker with the G1 properly. But even so, what struck me with the operating system is just how similar it feels to Symbian or Windows Mobile. It feels more like an operating system from that era rather than the iOS/WebOS era of clean slate designs for me. For instance, when you first turn the screen on to unlock the phone, instead of the swipe to unlock that we're all used to these days, what you had to do on Android 1.6 was begin by pressing on the call end button to turn the phone on, and then after you've done that, you press the menu button. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. It feels like it's something inspired by the Windows Mobile era of phones. And once you are in, it's actually quite remarkable how familiar this Android interface is though, especially compared to the Android of today. We've got a variety of panels, for instance, where we can swipe between, just like Android today. And on these panels, we can add app icons that we can move around, and we've also got widgets that we can add. It's amazing how design decisions from almost 20 years ago are still so relevant. And as we said earlier, one of the new features with Android Donut was the new search box that we can search for not only web pages, but we can also search for apps and also contacts as well. This is something that I would see more commonly on other phones after this. And I also do love how you can just kick the keyboard open and start searching straight away. A little bit like universal search or just type on the Palm Pre. Other aspects of the interface that feel really modern to me include the taskbar on the top, which looks like any other modern phone, and most impressively to me at least, the notification system. Most phones at the time had a really intrusive notification system like the iPhone that would basically take up the entire display every time you got a text or something. On Android 1.6 though, you just swipe down from the top of the display and all your notifications will be listed, just like on a modern phone. So it really is quite forward thinking in a lot of ways. Another thing that we see over here that we see on Android phones today is the apps drawer. So while you do have your sliding customized panels, you could press this button down here to bring up all of your apps that you've got. And also quite interestingly though, despite being 2008, you do have this swipe up gesture to bring up the panel as well. So that just made me very excited just then. That's quite similar to WebOS, just swiping up to bring up the launcher, very exciting. What feels somewhat less current though are all these buttons down here. Okay, so I know that BlackBerries and Windows mobile phones kept these answer and reject call buttons for quite a while longer. These buttons to me feel like they're just holdovers from the classic era of smartphones. And the trackball, while I do like the practicality of it, especially how you can navigate basically the entire phone without tapping on the display, it just feels like something that should have been left in the past, as this was definitely inspired by BlackBerries of the time. The home button on the left is equivalent to the iPhone's home button and also later versions of Android. What's quite interesting though is that this is the button that takes you to multitasking as well. So just hold down to bring your 6 most recent apps. And while this definitely was not the first phone with multitasking, as Windows Mobile and Symbian had it for quite a few years at this point, this is, I have to argue, quite an elegant solution. And it feels more like the sort of set and forget solutions that we've got today, as it only seems to keep the 6 most recent apps in the RAM and you don't have to actually close anything manually like you do on Windows Mobile. We had to close a lot of apps if your phone was running too slowly. What I found quite interesting here is what Google had to do to work around Apple's touch patents. Well, Apple didn't patent the capacitive touchscreen, as that had been seen on phones like the LG Prada prior. What they did patent were things like the natural scrolling with inertia and bounce, a bit like what we see on a modern phone, and I can demonstrate with the Palm Pre. So for instance, on the Palm Pre, when I scroll down on this app list, there is a little bit of a bounce. And obviously, pinch to zoom was something that Apple had put a patent on at the time. It's my understanding that Palm ignored these patents as they believed that they could out-patent troll Apple, as Palm technically had the patent for the smartphone. So if Apple decided to sue Palm about, having bounce on scrolling, Palm could just counter-sue in a more serious way. Unfortunately, Google at the time, they were a new player, so they didn't exactly have many patents and couldn't quite risk that lawsuit with Apple. So we can see over here that while the browsing is, somewhat natural in apps like the browser, when you hit the bottom of the display, there is no bounce whatsoever. And if I wanted to zoom in, just forget about that, because, for example, if we go into our Photos app, which I believe is called the Gallery in Android, I'm still learning. To zoom in, unlike on an iPhone or a Palm phone, where you could use multi-touch, you had to press on these buttons over here, which feels like going back to 2005. I believe that after the Palm Pre was announced in January of 2009, the other manufacturers finally felt the courage to make their own implementations of the technology. So we only had to wait until March of 2009 when the successor to the G1 / Dream, the HTC Magic, to see multi-touch finally being implemented on an Android phone. Overall, I do have to say that after using this phone for a little while, that I do feel a lot more positively about it than I did in the past. While we can see that the first publicly available Android phone was clearly a mixture of ideas from both older operating systems like Windows Mobile and BlackBerry 5 at the time, I think, and also the newly incumbent iPhone OS, it comes together in a package that is remarkably cohesive, even if the hardware seems to be put together with no designer in mind. And a lot of the ideas in the operating system, like the paneled customization home screen, the notification drawer, and the over-the-air updates, among others, are still influences that we can see on our phones today, whether or not if it's an Android or iOS phone. Do I think that this was a better phone than the BlackBerry Storm, the iPhone 3G, or let's say the Palm Pre of its day? Well, in my opinion, while it isn't as stylish an OS as BlackBerry 5 was, this definitely works a lot better. It's a lot more stable. And while this is not as slick as, let's say, what iPhone OS was, it's definitely a lot more flexible. And finally, WebOS. We all know how I feel about WebOS. This was an operating system that was as slick as iPhone OS, but had more power and flexibility than Android. I believe that WebOS should still be with us today, really. But Android 1.6 was the right blend of Windows Mobile and iOS for 2008, and this was the right combination that won the market. I feel like that to really have a better understanding of the smartphone world today, we really need to look at the phones that brought us here. And my God, am I happy that I finally tried the T-Mobile G1, as I can finally see how this became one of the most influential phones of all time. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please give me a like and a subscribe. Comment if you believe that the G1 is one of the most influential smartphones of all time, or you have a better suggestion. And until next time, hope you are having a lovely day, and toodaloo.